For your interest, 10% of all university graduates in New Zealand are from computer science or computer engineering. 10%. Of that number, 30% is female and 70% is male. And the number of women is not only increasing, but is very obvious in the success of the graduates as well. That our top graduates consistently are women, particularly in computer science. Our postgraduate numbers, however, have reduced by more than 50% over the last 10 years. That is, students going to master's degrees or to PhDs. There's two major reasons for this. One is that we have a shortage of skilled expertise, that is, graduates with a bachelor's degree, licentiate bachelor's degree, in our own industry, in our software industry, in our hardware industry, and of course that attracts graduates into it in New Zealand and outside of New Zealand, but also because the cost of studying in university has increased. So the cost for the individual student has increased dramatically over the last decade, which means that it's more difficult for students to embark on a master's degree or a PhD. So we have a range of scholarships that we make available to enable students to study for those degrees, and I'm sure the same in Chile, the students have to work to generate some income to assist in their studies. What has happened though, at what we call the undergraduate level, at the bachelor's level, which can be a 3 or 4 year degree in New Zealand, is that a number of students have moved to taking their computing degree and some other major subject at the same time. And so we have students now who are blending, for example, business economics or management with computing on the one hand, or maybe a science subject of computing, or maybe something from liberal arts and computing. And that has encouraged us to look at how we can blend computer science and computer engineering with other disciplines in a more meaningful way, so that students are not only saying, I'll do this with this, but they're saying, I'm going to do this, which includes this and this. And that's a whole different way of looking at how they undertake their careers. I should mention that more than 50% of computing graduates, that's computer science and computer engineering graduates, leave New Zealand for employment in other countries, or they enter occupations that are not directly ICT focused. And that's fascinating. We have a number of students who have completed a degree in computing of one form or another, but then work in some other industry. And what we've found, yet again, is that many of those industries are the multimedia industries, the design industries, and what's become more popularly known in New Zealand as the creative industries. All of this is leading us to think about how we can be more innovative with our education options. Just some key points. In New Zealand, we have had a growing software industry now for probably 30 years. We have a very vibrant software industry, and we export a lot of our products. Excuse me. In fact, we've seen a 34% increase in software exports out of New Zealand between 1998 and 1999. That increase in the 2005-2006 financial year rose to 55%. Clearly, I don't have any figures for 2007 because we're still there. But that's a dramatic increase in software products. And if we look at the actual dollars earned, export dollars earned through the software industry, what we find is that in fact software for New Zealand earns 5 times as much as our total export wine production sales, which is quite dramatic given that we, like Chile, produce a lot of wine. We can't keep up with the demand for the wine that we produce. And yet, our software earns the country 5 times as much. And that's a really interesting figure when we take into account the fact that we also have a demand for expertise from our graduates in computer science and computer engineering. And so we could fill the demand, perhaps we have an even more dramatic earning capacity from our software exports. Our place in the world is interesting. You know, we're a small country, I mentioned that before, but we've had a lot of successes. Sir Edmund Hillary climbing Mount Everest, Peter Snell beating the 3-minute mile in running races, and of course, until the recent World Cup, the All Blacks, who have not done quite so well in rugby just recently, but are still a magnificent team of sportsmen. But also in New Zealand, we've been very early adopters of technology. Consistently, OECD reports have shown New Zealand to be at the forefront of new technology. When new technology comes out from wherever, New Zealand seems to take it on very quickly and adopt it and put it into practice. And that's been very useful for many companies like IBM, Hewlett-Packard, and others who have made early releases of software and hardware in New Zealand to see, you know, what bugs there are and how it's received by the professional community and also the business community. For example, 4th-generation languages and computer-assisted software engineering tools were adopted into practice very, very quickly in New Zealand, very early on. So declarative languages as compared with structured programming languages were picked up very early, and a lot of research was done around the comparison of the productivity gains that could be made from using declarative languages, 4th-generation languages, and case tools, some of it by myself and my collaborators, a long time before these products were picked up elsewhere in the world. It just seems to be a New Zealand characteristic to be interested in taking something new very quickly. Electronic funds transfer and point-of-sale systems for ATM machines and for in the stores, as of course you have in Chile, also were picked up very early in New Zealand, and in fact some years ahead of where they were picked up in any real way in Europe or, for example, the United States. Cellular phones, telephones. I think I read somewhere, by the way, that in Chile now 41% of homes have mobile phones, and landlines are losing popularity. This is a very interesting phenomenon, and one that we in New Zealand seem to be have adopted as well. But as with all of these large-scale projects, infrastructure is the real issue. The technology works, but the infrastructure behind it has to be robust, and that means having a lot of money which is put into infrastructure very early on when adopting new technology. So there's a risk. There's always a risk associated with these things. We've always been very high volume users of ICT products and services, all kinds of products, optimization products, for example, and management services around that. I noticed in the latest report I read that we're the 7th highest number of internet hosts per 1,000 inhabitants in the reports of international use of internet clusters and